Funding for this edition of Remember Them with Steve Adubato and Jacqui Tricarico has been provided by PSEG Foundation, NJM Insurance Group, serving New Jersey's drivers, homeowners, and business owners for more than 100 years. RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together. The New Jersey Education Association. Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. United Airlines. New Jersey Institute of Technology, NJIT, makes industry-ready professionals in all STEM fields. And by the Russell Berry Foundation, making a difference. Promotional support provided by New Jersey Globe. And by New Jersey Monthly, the magazine of the Garden State, available at newsstands.
Welcome to Remember Them. I'm Steve Adubato with my colleague, Jacqui Tricarico, our executive producer. Jacqui, we are talking to a great author. You see his book over my left shoulder. Nelson Johnson, the author of Boardwalk Empire. There would not have been an HBO series if it were not for Nelson Johnson, also a former judge. The history of Atlantic City. Jacqui, you saw that interview. We did it already as we're taping. What the heck did you take from it, and what should people be paying attention to?
Well, Steve, you and I have both bonded over our love for that HBO show, Boardwalk Empire. And for me, I'm from South Jersey, the real South Jersey, right outside of Atlantic City. So there's so much to learn about that part of the state. And we hear some really interesting facts from Nelson, but really focusing a bit more on the Prohibition era. And for me, sometimes when I think Atlantic City and the history of Atlantic City, one thing that always pops up in my mind is the Miss America pageant, something that was started during that time period as well to bring in tourists outside of the regular, the summer schedule when things weren't so busy, to bring more tourists in during that off season. And it was a staple there for so many years.
But here's the thing that struck me. One of the things that Nelson Johnson said, and we talked a lot about Nucky Johnson, not related, but in the series, he's known as Nucky Thompson. What struck me was he was talking about how Nucky developed all that power of being a corrupt political figure, but he was beloved in Atlantic City by the people of Atlantic City. Why do you think that was?
Well, he was able to gain respect, and that was the most important thing. He often didn't need to use force or violence for a long period of time because he gained the respect of so many. So people fell in line. People listened to him. When he was talking, you were listening and doing what he asked you to do. So that's something that made him really unique during that time period.
I'm not sure he asked in certain cases, but that's another story, Jacqui. The casinos legalized gambling in the late 1970s and Atlantic City. And we also talked about Donald Trump coming to Atlantic City. There's a chapter in the book called The Donald Comes to Town. Fascinating. President Trump has a history in Atlantic City, which Judge Johnson talked about.
He sure does. He sure does. And we learn more about that from Nelson coming up next.
Look at Jacqui ducking that. I picked that up. That was good. That was fine. So this not a political show. Remember Them is not political. It's about history. It's about the history of people who have passed, and also places like Atlantic City. For Jacqui and myself, we're going to see Nelson Johnson, author of that great book over my shoulder, Boardwalk Empire. Let's check it out.
Mr. Mayor, fellow members of the City Council, in less than 2 hours, liquor will be declared illegal by decree of the distinguished gentlemen of our nation's Congress. To those beautiful, ignorant bastards.
January 16th, 8:03 p.m., Johnny Torrio meeting with Nucky Thompson.
Mr. Torrio?
Big Jim Colosimo, Arnold Rothstein, and Charlie Luciano.
Jimmy Darmody, Al Capone. You guys gonna get into the liquor business too?
Your friend from New York, he just took us for 90 grand.
You can't be half a gangster, Nucky. Not anymore. This entire city, this Sodom, will be cleansed all at once.
We are honored to be joined by a great author. He's Nelson Johnson, historian, author of Boardwalk Empire. You've heard of that, right? It's the book over my left shoulder. The Birth, High Times, and Corruption of Atlantic City. Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for joining us again.
Happy to be here, Steve.
Let's do this. We'll talk about so many aspects of not just Boardwalk Empire and what made it a great show and how it came from the book, but also the history of Atlantic City. Why are you so fascinated with the history, the culture, the corruption, the high times, etc., and decline of Atlantic City?
Well, it's important to understand that historically speaking, corruption in Atlantic City was organic. And by organic, what I mean is that it was a necessity. Early Atlantic City basically had a 12, if they were lucky, a 14-week window in which to make a buck. And so whatever the visitors wanted, that's what they had to have. And a lot of that entertainment that the visitors wanted didn't necessarily comply with the law. At the very beginning of the book, I quote a gentleman who I interviewed many times, had to persist to get him to talk to me. And at one point he said to me, "Nels, if the people who came to town had wanted Bible readings, we'd have given them that. But no one ever asked for Bible readings. They wanted booze, broads, and gambling. So that's what we gave them." So to provide booze, broads, and gambling, there's a lot of instances in which the law has to be ignored. And Atlantic City was really good at that because it was, in those days, sort of a remote place. And they had no difficulty thumbing their nose at Prohibition. Prohibition never really happened in Atlantic City because prior to that, as you may recall from history, there were things called the Bishop's Laws. And the Bishop's Law said no booze on Sunday. And Atlantic City's response was, "What do you mean no booze on Sunday? That's our busiest day of the week." So for about 20 years, Atlantic City was ignoring the Bishop's Laws. And then when Prohibition rolled out, they just continued doing what they wanted to do 7 days a week instead of one.
We'll talk about the mayors of Atlantic City and the history of corruption, but it's not just the mayors. Nucky Johnson in the series, Nucky Thompson, for obvious, I don't know what reasons, but I'm sure there's legality involved. And by the way, I should also make it clear that Nelson Johnson is a former judge. So let me try this. What made Nucky Johnson so popular, well-liked, loved in Atlantic City, and a thug to others?
Well, locally, he really was a benevolent boss. And he never had to use violence because he had the community behind him. I mean, my favorite story, which never got into the book, was something that an older woman came up to me one night after I made a presentation at St. Michael's Hall, and she said, "When I was a girl, my family had a laundry, and something happened between my father and Nucky, and the next thing you know, people are coming in and they're taking their clean laundry and they're not leaving any dirty laundry behind. And after about 10 days, they have no business." And so the wife, hammered her husband and said, "You got to go see Mr. Johnson." And within another week, the business started coming back. Now, I tell people that's power. Power is not ever having to get violent. And Nucky rarely was
Where did
violent.
his power come from,
He got
Nelson?
his
Where
rice
did his
and blue.
power come from?
His power came from being able to keep everybody happy in the off season.
Yeah, but it
You
also
got-
because
again,
he
you had a
controlled,
12, 14
but he
week-
controlled law enforcement. He controlled the judges. He had relationships with organized crime figures. All of that, and combined with his personality, would Nucky have ever been what he became if it were not for the Volstead Act and Prohibition, outlawing alcohol?
Prohibition definitely boosted his career. They viewed it as a real look. Convention Hall on the Boardwalk would not have been built without Prohibition. They had so many people wanting to come to Atlantic City because they knew they could drink and party and also discuss business. That's what led to the construction of Convention Hall on the Boardwalk.
But here's the other thing about Nucky and reading about him in the book. By the way, the book is accurate. The series on HBO is great, but let's just say I'm not sure it's not totally consistent with the book. Is that a fair assessment?
It's fictional history.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, there's some of that in politics too, but I'll leave that alone right now. So let's try this. Nucky Johnson is this powerful figure who controls so much in Atlantic City: booze, prostitution, businesses. Everyone's kicking back to him, et cetera, et cetera. What brought Nucky down?
What brought him down at the end of the day? An income tax audit, like so many other corrupt politicians. He didn't pay enough in the way of taxes. They got him that way. But Nucky's power really did. Keep in mind, it went beyond simply Atlantic City and Atlantic County. He had power in Trenton, and he had power, which I never really fully appreciated until even after the writing of this book. He had power with his ability to do deals with Frank Hague.
Frank Hague, the Democratic mayor of Jersey City.
Correct.
Nucky, the Republican leader in Atlantic City, Atlantic County. Why the heck were they able to do business together given their different political parties?
They were able to do business because there were occasions when Nucky would get together people from Cape May County, Atlantic County, Ocean County. He had people that he could persuade to vote his way. He could get Republican votes to sometimes stop Republicans from steamrolling Democrats in North Jersey. And Frank Hague and Nucky did business on a regular basis.
Let me ask you this. There's a chapter in the book called Plantation by the Sea. It's chapter 3 in the book.
Correct.
Fascinated by this. The African American community in Atlantic City, historically segregated from wherever the money was being made, even before casinos became legal, which we'll talk about in the late 70s. We'll talk about that in a minute. The history of the African American community in Atlantic City. Please share, Nelson.
That was the most difficult chapter to write. It eventually resulted in a second book called The North Side. But what I understood as I was researching my history is that no one had ever addressed the indispensable role of African American labor in the resort economy. You had a town that for a 10, 12-week period, when they were hosting conventions and all sorts of things in the early teens and 20s, you had a situation where 1/3 people on any given day could be visiting the town. Now, how do you do that without a good labor force? More than 90% of the hotel workforce was African American, and I have photos all over the place in my second book, which shows that you could have a work staff of 50 people, one white guy telling them what to do, and they were very able workers. Many of them were actually recruited from the South. Freed slaves and children of freed slaves were recruited to come north. I saw a copy of a handbill, but I never could get my hands on it because it wasn't for sale, saying to people, come to Atlantic City. And so, yes, people from the South after the Civil War were recruited to come to Atlantic City.
But it was like but it had plantation-like characteristics.
Yes, and no question about it.
To see more Remember Them programs, visit us online at rememberthemnj.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato, PhD, and at facebook.com/Jacqui Tricarico. And follow us on X at Steve Adubato.
New Jersey Institute of Technology has supported New Jersey businesses since 1881, when it was founded as the Newark Technical School. And through their partnership with the nonprofit New Jersey Innovation Institute, they're igniting innovation and delivering transformative products and services throughout the state. Learn more at njit.edu and njii.com.
New Jersey is home to the best public schools in the nation. And that didn't happen by accident. It's the result of parents, educators, and communities working together year after year to give our students a world-class education, no matter the challenge. Because parents and educators know that with a shared commitment to our public schools, our children can learn, grow, and thrive. And together, we can keep New Jersey's public schools the best in the nation.
Well, do you have it?
I do, but I don't think you're going to like it.
NJM's proud to put policyholders first. What does it even mean?
Evidently, their top priority is doing what's right for their customers.
Oh, I can't compete with that.
No jingles or mascots.
Really?
Just great insurance. NJM.
Donald Trump, the chapter is literally called The Donald Comes to Town, chapter 12. I read it twice over to try to understand. What was the deal when Donald Trump came to Atlantic City? A, and B, Mr. Johnson, do you believe Donald Trump ever really expected to succeed? Loaded question. Or did he have an exit strategy the entire time?
Well, I don't know what was in his head in terms of what he was expecting to. I'm assuming he expected to succeed, or he wouldn't have done it.
Well, the bankruptcy came pretty quick.
But he filed several bankruptcies, and a lot of people got hurt in a very big way.
Explain that to folks. How did people get hurt by Donald Trump filing for bankruptcy several times with his multiple casinos in Atlantic City? Explain that to folks, many of whom, by the way, voted for Donald Trump.
Well,
talk about those working people.
When he took the Taj Mahal off the hands of Merv Griffin and completed construction of it, he promised everybody, don't worry, work with me on this and you'll get paid on the back end. There were carpet companies, at least 2 or 3. There were tile companies, at least 2 or 3. There was a client of mine who had a glass business. You had union workers through the painting union and whatnot. They got paid nothing. He stiffed them. And people were put out of business, in plain words. I mean, I'll say the one name. It was a great family business for many years. Atlantic Plate Glass, and I represented them. And they're gone.
As a lawyer, you represented them.
But prior to Trump, they were in the town for about 75 years. After Trump, they were gone.
He just said, I'm going bankrupt. I don't have the money. I'm not paying you.
Correct.
Do you think that was the plan all along?
Many people think that. I don't know that. But many people think that. Some of the lawyers that I spoke to who represented clients in the bankruptcy proceedings, some of them thought that because look, the bankruptcy came so swiftly after the Taj Mahal opened. It was a prepackaged bankruptcy, is how lawyers define it, not how I define it. Because I don't do bankruptcy, don't understand bankruptcy. But what I do know is he hurt a lot of people, and payments that were supposed to be made to the union members' benefit funds and healthcare funds, they weren't made. So people got hurt. They got hurt badly.
The casinos. Legalized gambling happens in the late 70s in New Jersey, becomes legal. To what degree did the casinos help boost the economy of Atlantic City, or both, or accelerate the decline of Atlantic City?
Oh my. They certainly did boost the economy for, I'd say, 20 years, but beginning almost 20 years ago, things started to decline because of competition, because gambling is being, there were many communities that were in the same desperate straits that Atlantic City was, and they said, well, why not try gambling? Why not try gambling? And that did hurt Atlantic City. There's no question about it. And Atlantic City, candidly, I think they're going to really be struggling If gambling, when Atlantic City is going to be facing competition from New York, that's a very big problem for Atlantic City. And a lot of local people recognize that. Be a very big problem.
Over the years as a broadcaster, I've interviewed many mayors of Atlantic City before they were indicted, convicted, and went to jail. Why the heck does it seem, and if I'm wrong, as an expert, you'll push back, as a historian, you'll push back, correct me. Why does it seem like a disproportionate number of mayors of Atlantic City wind up engaged in corrupt activities?
Because everyone thinks they're going to be the next boss. And so the
next Nucky?
Yeah.
The next Hap Farley, who was a Republican leader who came after Nucky Johnson. They're going to be the next. So what? The rules don't apply to them?
You got it. You got it. Here's, I tell people all the time, as small as Atlantic City is, it has an outsized presence. But what you have to keep in mind about the local politics is that they never developed the traditional means for the acquisition, exercise, and transfer of power. Because everybody, I worked in City Hall long enough to know that there was at least a half a dozen people in that building that thought, I ought to be boss. And so everybody's got their knives out and willing to put it in somebody else's back to see if they can climb their way up the ladder. And once they're there, sometimes they do pretty stupid things. Now, there have been mayors who have gone to jail who fell on the sword, so to speak, for the entire organization when they could have brought the organization down.
What organization are you? Because there have been Democratic mayors and Republican mayors who have had issues with the law. So what organization are you referring to, Nelson?
Well, when I'm referring to the organization, I'm referring to the Farley organization.
So I skipped this. My bad. Describe who Hap Farley was and why Farley mattered, particularly when there were only 21 state senators in the state of New Jersey, one for each county, and Hap Farley, if I'm not mistaken, was a senator in Atlantic County?
Correct. He was a senator in Atlantic County, and through his seniority over the years, he gained a lot of influence in how things got done in Trenton. He was able to take care of the other South Jersey senators, and he could consistently have 7 votes, which would really disrupt things in the Senate.
7 out of 21.
Yeah, so I'm saying if he lives of a mind to disrupt, he could. And Farley made deals with Hudson County as well. That happened, and with well, not Essex County really, but Hudson County. But I met with a gentleman whose last name is Stark. I can't remember his first name. He was counsel to Governor Hughes, and he said to me,
Governor Richard J. Hughes, who served as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court as well. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Nelson.
Correct. You have the right Richard Hughes. And Mr. Stark said to me, I sat in on more than one meeting between the senator from Atlantic County and the governor, and Farley's agenda came first. And if we ran out of time, we talked about the governor's agenda at the next meeting. Farley had that kind of clout. But also, Richard Hughes was one savvy politician.
Let me try this. Got a couple minutes left. The mob in Atlantic City, how influential were they? Because I know when the Casino Control Act was passed, I know when gambling became legal in New Jersey, the obsession was to keep the mob, the mafia, out of Atlantic City. Was that a success?
No, they kept the mob out of the casinos. That's for sure. But they didn't keep the mob out of the local union, Local 54. They infiltrated that, and the federal courts had to appoint a monitor to oversee things.
Those are the workers in the casinos.
Yeah, correct. But did anybody in the mob get a casino license? No. Did anybody in the mob have influence over how casinos were operated? I don't think so. But did they have influence over how the local 54 union was operated? Yeah, they did. For about, I'm going to say about a 5 or 6 year period, they had too much influence, and that's when the federal courts came down on top of them.
Could AC have ever been the Vegas of the East? Did it have the infrastructure where it was, all the factors? Could it ever have been Vegas?
The answer is yes. And why putting aside the fact that, the economy tends to be seasonal because it's a seaside resort, what I saw over the years was so many missed opportunities that it really, really genuinely disturbed me. I mean, one was an effort by a gentleman that I knew who tried to start an airline, and he couldn't get a commitment from each of the casinos. They were all like looking over each other's shoulders. He couldn't get a commitment from anybody to book a certain number of seats each time there was a flight to, say, Pittsburgh, a flight to Boston, a flight to. He had a Boardwalk Airways had a very good business plan, and I'm not the only one that thought that. Problem is, no one could get the casinos to think that. I mean, that was a major missed opportunity. The other thing that disturbs me about Atlantic City is they don't know enough about their own past. What made Atlantic City special in the past is what I refer to as spectacle, which was some events that would draw people.
You mean the diving horse into the water, that kind of thing?
Yeah, but that's just one of the kind of things.
Just one of them.
Atlantic City had many spectacles. They had dog races. They had boxing matches. Boxing matches were a draw, but it fizzled out after about 7 or 8 years. They just gave away the air show, which really disturbs me. It's going to be in Wildwood next year.
Hey, Nelson Johnson, I cannot thank you enough, not just for joining us to put the history and the perspective and add your perspective on what Atlantic City was, where it is, and people can decide for themselves what their future of it is, but for this book, which spawned one of the greatest series ever. Nelson, I can't thank you enough, and I know I'm thanking you for an awful lot of people who appreciate your work.
Well,
thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Good talking to you, as always.
I'm Steve Adubato, the history of Atlantic City from the one who knows it the best, Nelson Johnson. See you next time.
Remember Them with Steve Adubato and Jacqui Tricarico is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by PSEG Foundation, NJM Insurance Group, RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together. The New Jersey Education Association, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, United Airlines, New Jersey Institute of Technology, and by the Russell Berry Foundation. Promotional support provided by New Jersey Globe and by New Jersey Monthly. To see more Remember Them programs, visit us online at rememberthemnj.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato PhD and at facebook.com/Jacqui Tricarico. And follow us on X at Steve Adubato.
New Jersey Institute of Technology has supported New Jersey businesses since 1881, when it was founded as the Newark Technical School. And through their partnership with the nonprofit New Jersey Innovation Institute, they are igniting innovation and delivering transformative products and services throughout the state. Learn more at njit.edu and njii.com.
New Jersey is home to the best public schools in the nation. And that didn't happen by accident. It's the result of parents, educators, and communities working together year after year to give our students a world-class education, no matter the challenge. Because parents and educators know that with a shared commitment to our public schools, our children can learn, grow, and thrive. And together, we can keep New Jersey's public schools the best in the nation.
You can't hide what makes NJM Insurance so great. Although some may try. we're proud to put policyholders first. No jingles or mascots, just great insurance. NJM.